that this is an important time to think about the lessons of World War II and how they apply today. Uh, it was already mentioned the importance of getting the narrative right. The Kremlin right now is engaging in a strenuous effort to erase the part of history where the Soviet Union engaged in a secret pact with Nazi Germany to attack Poland, take over the Baltic States, and killed millions and millions of people. They would like people only to remember that later, when Germany turned on the Soviet Union, that Soviet forces fought back and many of them were killed. They've tried to equate the resistance of Soviet forces once attacked by Germany with Russia, which is also not true because so many of those who fought and so many of those who died were not Russians. They were part of the Soviet Union, but they were Ukrainians, they were Belarusians, they were Georgians. There were so many nationalities there. And that is not just a question of Russia, but a question of those fighting once attacked by Germany as well. But we shouldn't forget the origins of this, because it was that Molotov-Ribbentrop pact that really was the genesis of the war. And it led to the deaths of so many millions of Ukrainians and Poles and Belarusians and others. Another thing that we need to remember out of this is that the reason that this war began is connected directly to the nature of those regimes, the nature of the Nazi regime in Germany, the nature of Stalin's regime in the Soviet Union. They saw repression domestically as justified. They saw aggression against neighbors and domination of neighbors and conducting warfare like that as justified. And that is a lesson that applies directly to the situation today, because we see a similar situation where, as Russia has become more autocratic, it is also engaged in increasing aggression against neighbors, whether that is in Ukraine with the illegal seizure of Crimea, with the war in the Donbass, with the occupation of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, the efforts to support the separatist regime in Transnistria. This is also connected to the nature of the regime in the Kremlin today. As we think about the impact of the coronavirus and where we come out of this, there's a great danger, as Anders said, that authoritarian regimes will enter this post-pandemic world with renewed appetite and perhaps even some advantages. They are more determined and more adept at using and promoting disinformation. They're seeking to undermine adversaries. They impose stronger controls in societies, and they've even used the coronavirus as an excuse, as a means to increase those controls even further. They have state-driven and top-down economic policies and state-driven enterprises, which may be effective tools in trying to assert their power in the post-pandemic world. And meanwhile, democracies are in some ways moving in the opposite direction. We are moving in more nationalist, populist directions. We are concerned about immigration. We are putting up walls. We are thinking internally rather than thinking more broadly. And as Anders suggested, at the end of World War II, the leaders at that time recognized that we must never let this happen again. And we need to pull ourselves together to build a better world. We need to build one that protects freedom, that creates the space for economic development and trade and growth and opportunity. And we need to make sure that this is a space that is safe and secure. And that was the reason for the development of those institutions and a burst of creativity in late 1940s and 1950s. NATO, the United Nations, the Bretton Woods organizations, the IMF and the World Bank, the European Coal and Steel Community, which later became the EU, and so on. This was a burst of energy to create a structure for a world order to prevent that kind of cataclysm of World War II from happening again. I think in the post-pandemic world and in the face of growing authoritarianism, whether it's in Russia or also from China or elsewhere, the time is again upon the Western world, those free societies in the world, to pull together and to think creatively and to go forward with some rather large ideas. I think one of those ideas is that it needs to be inclusive. Uh, it is no longer sustainable, in my mind, for NATO or the EU to put a wall around themselves and say freedom and economic prosperity and security apply only to us and not to those people who share our values just on the other side of our borders. But we should be open to countries like Ukraine and Georgia and Moldova and any other European countries who share those values and want to be part of that kind of community. Another thing we need to do is double down on economic growth and investment and trade favoring democratic states. We have seen a situation where we've drifted towards trade barriers and trade wars. The move towards a transatlantic trade and investment partnership was shelved a couple of years ago. I think it's time to come back, and with North America, including Canada, Mexico, and with the European Union and partners of the European Union to build the largest democratic free trade area in the world. And I think that would be to the benefit of all of us. And finally, I think we need to take that greater consolidation of a democratic community and bring that to bear in global organizations. We need global organizations. We need the UN. We need the World Health Organization. We need them, but uh, we can't be complacent and think that they will uphold democratic values on their own without democratic states that are parties to them pushing them. Others are members as well. Authoritarian states are members as well. They have a different agenda. And we need to see that as a playing field for competition, but where, with concerted effort from a prosperous and democratic transatlantic community, we can actually have a greater impact in strengthening those institutions.